Well, hello and welcome to Volume 2 of Drink the Music. I'm Brian here as always with Michaela. And Michaela, today we are taking a little bit of a different step. Last week we talked about Joni Mitchell's Blue, which is very much a snapshot of kind of the life and times of Joni Mitchell, right? It's kind of like this photo album of a musical album, right? You're looking through the pictures, you're getting these stories kind of things. And this
hmm
week we're taking a little bit of a turn and we're talking about Coldplay, Viva La Vida, or Death and All His Friends, which to me is more of kind of this. I don't know. It's almost like this orchestral composition, kind of like this opera that Coldplay put together after having these smash hits.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, I think this is a definitely a snapshot in a different way of something that was building and a maybe not a culmination, but it felt like definitely the beginning of a new era of music. It's definitely in terms of the time, but also in terms of Coldplay themselves. And I'm so
Mm-hmm.
excited to be able to be talking about this because this is one of your favorite albums.
It is. That's true. Absolutely. It is one of my favorite albums. Yeah, I've loved this one ever since 2008. So, let's who is Coldplay? Michaela, that's important stuff to know before we get into this album. So, 1996, we have Chris Martin and Johnny Buckland. They meet at university. Guy Berryman joins the band kind of shortly after that, and they start releasing music as a group called Big Fat Noises in 1997. No drummer yet. Have to wait until 1998. Will Champion joins the band. They changed the name to Starfish and play the first show. And then a couple weeks later, they changed the name from Starfish, bad name, to Coldplay, good name. So just a few weeks there before they changed that name. They put out kind of the self-funded, self-produced album called Safety, which apparently was good enough, well enough received to get them an invite to play on the new band stage at Glastonbury. If you're not familiar with Glastonbury out there, that is a big, huge rock and roll, well, not even rock and roll, like all music festival for all of England. Like it is a big deal
It
to play at
is.
Glastonbury. So they're on this new band stage in '99, and then in the year 2000, their first album, Parachutes, is released.
Yeah. And that's where, if you were a human being who had ears and the ability to use them, you probably heard the song Yellow.
You definitely heard the song Yellow. That
Yeah.
song
You
was
probably heard
all
it 400 million times. It was one of
was
the most played songs of the year 2000.
one of the most played songs of all time for sure. Which kind of gives Yellow a bad rap. Yellow is actually a very beautiful song if you go back and listen to it. But at the time, like you could not avoid Coldplay. You could not avoid the song Yellow from that song or from that album Parachutes in 2000. Following up to that, they had A Rush of Blood to the Head in 2002, X and Y in 2005, and pretty good. You're a young band. You've been around for 5 years, and all of a sudden you have 12 Grammy nominations, 4 wins, including Record of the Year for the song Clocks. And remember those albums? Parachutes, double platinum, Rush of Blood to the Head, 4 times platinum, and X and Y 3 times platinum. That is a lot of good banding. Good job, Coldplay, there in those 5 years. Which
Yeah.
which gets us to Viva La Vida, or Death and His Friends. So in an article with or an interview with Dig, Chris Martin says that basically kind of at that point, right? X and Y comes out, they've gotten all of these Grammy noms. Chris Martin says, well, we can't really get any bigger than we are. So we're going to have to take a step back and see if we can get better. And that's what they did. So I guess we're going to have to take a quick break, mix up this week's cocktail, and we'll be right back to find out if they got any better or not. But we'll definitely have a cocktail. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
So this cocktail comes from Nourished Kitchen. And if we're going to do a strawberry swing, we really need to do a strawberry smash. And it's incorporating some of the same aspects from the album as it
Mm-hmm,
does
mm-hmm.
in this amazing punch that is, number one, my favorite color. Number two, super delicious. And I'm super excited to share it with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We are excited to share it with the world. And yeah, we're taking this cocktail. Obviously, it's coming from the track album Strawberry Swing, but it incorporates some other stuff from the album too here and the composition of this. And it's pretty simple to put together, and it's going to make enough for roughly 4 drinks, 3 to 4 drinks, depending on how heavy your hand is when it comes to pouring these for sure. So let's whip one of these up here real quick, Michaela. So grab yourself like a small little pitcher, a big mason jar, a big measuring cup. Actually, is what I used for mine, like a 4 cup measuring cup. Put in 2 cups of like sliced and just roughly chopped up strawberries, 3 tablespoons of honey, a half a teaspoon of coriander, 1 teaspoon of rose water, or you could use creme de violet, which is what I did, for Violet Hill, of course. The juice from 1 lime and 2 cups of rosé, French, please. Revolution is afoot here in this album, after all. So you're going to put all that into your pitcher. You're going to give the strawberries muddle, kind of bust those up, get that strawberry juice flowing. And then I think what you should do, it didn't say this in the recipe here on the website, but I think you should probably mix this up and let it set, like put it in the fridge and let it just hang out for an hour or two. It's going to get all that juice out of the strawberries, get it nice and incorporated and chilled down, good to go. And then you're going to serve it up. Grab some glasses, grab some ice, slice up a little strawberry, pour it out, and converse about existentialism and, monarchies and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the best way to do that is with alcohol for sure. So I actually didn't have any cream de violet, so I used rose water, and I have to say, this is beautiful. So some of the garnish that they say is you can get, some edible rose petals if you want, and kind of strew them in there or lay them on top of the drink and make it extra pretty. This was absolutely the most, I mean, it's just a beautiful drink. It's whether you strain out the strawberry bits or not. I made this as a real punch, and I served it to a bunch of people to get their takes on it. And it is the right level of sweetness if you use roughly 3 tablespoons of honey. Some people thought that would be too much, and then we tasted it, and it really offsets with the coriander. So it was really kind of a nice balance to it. So it wasn't too sweet, and it wasn't too, I don't know, syrupy. I was worried that it might be a little too syrupy with the honey, but it was fine. There's rose water is super aromatic. So pay attention to that. It's a teaspoon. It's not a tablespoon. Now, I have no idea how this was with cream de violet, so I'd love your thoughts on that, Brian, because I know we weren't able to drink this together. But the rose water really pushes through. And it's the right amount. I would not put any more than that, no matter how much you love rose. I love rose. Right. The flavor and the essence of rose, but it was almost overpowering. You really want to make sure that you offset it with the coriander. If you forget the coriander, then you're just going to be drinking rose perfume, and that's not good for
very
anybody.
Rosy. It's going to be very rosy. Yeah, absolutely. The creme de violet was really nice, and kind of I took the inspiration obviously from the title of this, but I was thinking of ways I could incorporate something fun. So you could do the creme de violet, you could do some Saint Germain, you could use any of those kind of more floral liqueurs. And I thought that this was really good. It gave it kind of a little bit of unctuousness in the mouth. Oftentimes, if you see like a sangria recipe, you're going to see something like triple sec in that, or something along those lines, because it gives it just a little bit more mouthfeel. And that's, I think, what the creme de violet did in ours. But this was light and delicate and delicious. It was a really good way to jazz up a cheap bottle of rosé. If you've got an inexpensive bottle of rosé hanging out, you don't really feel like drinking it, add some strawberries and honey, coriander to it, mash it up, and you'll be good to go. And I thought that this was perfect. It was awesome. I was sitting out on the porch listening to this Coldplay album, and kind of sipping on this, and pondering the songs and stuff like that. I thought that this was an excellent cocktail, and perfect for this time of year, and just a really, really good one.
Yeah Absolutely. And I think we're going to talk about kind of the symbolism, because I think you're absolutely right. This paired really beautifully with the album in a bunch of different ways, which I can't wait to get into when we do our deep dive. So I guess, should we take a break, or are we diving right in? Because we're not really doing a spoiler warning for these, right? I'm just so excited.
No spoiler warning. You are excited. That's all right. No, we got to take another break real quick, because we're going to go mix up one of these cocktails real quick. And then we're going to be back to chat about this week's album, Coldplay, Viva La Vida, or Death and All His Friends. We'll be right back.
So for volume 2, we decided to cover one of your favorite albums, Brian, of all time, which is super exciting because we covered
Hmm.
one of
Hmm.
mine. And for anybody who's listening to this and is wondering how we pick these, we actually put them all to a vote. You have to get on our Patreon site to do that. So please think about that. It's a really cheap way to help support the podcast, and you get to be in charge of the Drink the Movies, Drink the Music destiny of what we're going to talk
That's right.
about. And
Yeah.
that's really exciting. So I was really excited to see that this was the choice that all of our
Mm-hmm.
patrons chose, and so yeah, let's dive into it.
That's right. Yeah, you can be in charge of our musical fates, for sure. But yeah, we're talking about Coldplay's 2008 album Viva La Vida, or Death and All His Friends. It is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's an album that I really like, and I really like kind of the composition of it. I love, the messaging of it, and I love the way that it's structured. So let's get into this. We're going to be kind of running through these tracks here. Nothing too crazy about each of these. Certainly there's resources if you want to go into like super deep dives on how these albums were made and all that stuff. But let's get into the album a little bit here, Michaela. So this one kicks off with track number one, Life in Technicolor, which is pretty easy to talk about because it's an instrumental piece. But I really love it's kind of bringing in, all the almost kind of these like world sounds to Coldplay, right? You think of Coldplay and you think of those hits, and you think of filling these big stadiums and playing something like Clocks or The Scientist. But this one's taking a more worldly spin. It's got some dulcimer going there. It's got some sitar going there, and it's this perfect little like kind of intro. When I listen to Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends, I think of like going into like a theater or like an opera house, taking a seat and just having this performed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. This is one of my favorite songs of the album. Is actually this first one, um, and it makes sense that it was never a single that was sent out to the radios because it's very short. It's only about 2.5 minutes long. But I totally agree with you. I think that this is one of the most beautiful introductions to an album that I've ever heard. And that's saying something for me. You're sitting there, and I had never listened to the album in the correct order until we sat
Mm-hmm.
down to listen to this. So very fresh ears, go easy on me. But I will say I was completely blown away by this opening song because, as you're absolutely right, it's like this beginning of that you're on the precipice of something amazing that you're about to experience, and there are these kind of echoes of music that is like cacophonic, where you don't know at the very beginning, you don't know exactly what you're hearing, and then the kind of melodical aspects of the song come into play, and then it just kind of rushes over you, and it's really amazing. I have to say, I was sitting in my favorite chair, and I almost got kind of teary listening to this opening
Mm-hmm.
song because it's so beautifully done, and the attention to detail. Whoever kind of did the sound engineering of creating the layers of music it was a genius in this, and it really sets you up for going on a journey. And this whole album to me was about changing directions and going deeper and just becoming more of your destined self. I don't know if Coldplay feels that's them, that this is what their intent was, but for me, it definitely felt like that. And this song sets it up so beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have that, which is kind of this symphonic score, um, being just an instrumental piece, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until the end of the song, and it drops out, and we go into track number two, Cemeteries of London, which opens up very kind of dark and bleak, as just Chris Martin kind of singing there. But kind of after this first verse, it opens up and into like this very fun kind of driving like a acoustic guitar section with kind of this clapping going on, and I really like this song. It's not one of my favorites on the CD, but I do really love the guitar part here, and I like kind of the message of this. If you read anything about Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends, when they wrote it, Coldplay was saying it was trying to be more of a like a political statement piece, which I kind of agree with, and we'll kind of talk through that as we go through uh, this. But I think that a song like this is really kind of about facing your own past as much as like facing the past of, here in this case, London, being is that where, the band is from. Speaking of the ghosts of the past and things, it speaks of like, like cemeteries in the oceans, which I'm guessing was tied to like the naval might of England at some point. And it kind of ends with this statement of I see God come in my garden, but I don't know what he said. For my heart wasn't open. And I really like that. It's about kind of confronting your past, and that is a theme that really kind of opens up for me throughout this album.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of themes of like life, death, and war, and this was the very first kind of war hymn of the tracks that I really identified with. And I listened to this one a couple times because I didn't quite understand it at first. But I really love that the guitar riff, because it feels like very traveling-esque, and very old worldly. So when I think of kind of London of the in the 1800s, or and this is very, when you see Coldplay, when they performed these songs, they were in like these French revolutionary kind of garb. So it kind of brings back that mindset in that time of what are you doing and why are you doing what you're doing, and it all comes from your past and things that happen to you that affect you going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. And that kind of sets us up into kind of track three then, which is Lost with an exclamation point. There's apparently various versions of Lost on other albums and things, kind of depending on how it's played. But this is Lost exclamation point. And I like the song a lot. It's kind of this slower kind of like pop melodic song almost, but I really like the song itself is kind of juxtaposed. So you're getting a lot of the music is being played on like this church like organ, like this cathedral organ. So obviously, that's in that sense is kind of tied to like these religious songs and services, which are all about being found and finding yourself. But the lyrics here of Lost is kind of the opposite of that. It's more soul searching, right? So you have kind of this church bit that's implying that you've found what you're looking for, but the lyrics are definitely going kind of in the opposite direction. And it reminds me a lot of the U2 song I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, which I think Brian Eno actually produced this album and has done a lot of producing with U2. But the song Lost was a good one. It was one of the singles off of the album, and really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like some of the lyrics in here where being lost is thought of as such a bad thing in life, right? Losing is given such a negative connotation. And this, I like how it begins with just because I'm losing doesn't mean I'm lost. But at the end of it, he's kind of, if you're feeling lost, you're kind of waiting till the firing stops. And I'm just waiting until the shine wears off, which is almost kind of, for me, when I was listening to this, it was very much like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you're thinking that you're going to lose someone or you're going to lose at something, you're almost, protecting your heart. So you're just waiting until the inevitable happens. I don't know. It was really interesting. And I like gosh, I hope I'm saying it right. Kind of the chord changes of this were very interesting to me. And I would try and sing it, but I would screw it up. So I'm not going to. I'm going to save everyone's ears. But the chords that just kind of where it would go da 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 da, and then it would change to a much different kind of register. Maybe is that the right way to say it? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it takes kind of a tonal shift there once the organ kind of drops out and it goes into that guitar solo bit there. And you bring up a good point of kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Speaking generally kind of about the album, and I'm going to hit on this a couple more times. Basically, if you would go back and read anything from Coldplay around 2008 when this album came out, they'd said that they'd written it as almost kind of this like political statement piece almost, and certainly there are aspects of that throughout the album. But to me, it almost is more of this self-fulfilling prophecy and really looking at like I mentioned with that Chris Martin quote, the band was as huge as a band could ever possibly be. right? So you're really kind of looking at that, I think, maybe even subconsciously to the band at this point, and what does that mean, and where do you go from here, right? Are there other roads you can travel? Do you keep just traveling down the same path? And I think that that is really interesting, and that kind of bleeds into then track number 4, which is 42. It takes its name and kind of theme from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as being kind of the meaning of everything. This song here, 42, it's about life and death and, kind of searching for the meaning of it, which is a big kind of recurring theme for it. It's a recurring theme for life and definitely a recurring theme for the album. So I like how kind of the theme of this album is encapsulated in this song that's titled after something that's allegedly the meaning of everything, and I like that a lot. And kind of some of the lines here, time is so short, I'm sure there must be something more of this. And it's a lot of introspective looking. Like I said, I take a lot of kind of cues here as saying, you've done it all, you've climbed Mount Everest in terms of being a band. So there must be something more, right? Do we keep writing these arena hits, or do we look elsewhere to try to be creative and things? And 42 is another one of the singles from this album. There were a bunch. Yeah, it's a really great song. It's probably my second favorite song of the
Oh
side
yeah,
A here.
nice. Yeah, I think this song, I remember hearing it at a memorial service, which is interesting, just because I think some of the lyrics are really around, you didn't get to heaven, but you made it close. The kind of references to being a ghost, and if you're dead, are you really dead, and you live on, and I think some of that has kind of worn on the ears of the listeners to turn this into almost kind of a parting song for some people. But when I listened to it in the context of this album, I didn't get that real feeling. So it was kind of a weird changeling song for me, because I totally thought that it was going to be more of a kind of a memorial to a person who had passed, because that's how I listened to it the first couple of times I heard it in context. And then within the album itself, I think you're right that it's very much a what do we do when we die? And death is kind of the pinnacle of life, which is weird to think about, because it's really only half. What if it's only half of the mountain, right? This idea that now they're at the top, they're as popular as they're ever going to be, they've gotten all these accolades. Now what happens? And the fact that they're not in heaven, maybe they weren't super happy, not necessarily happy, maybe not the right word, but like, what does that actually mean when you've reached the top of the mountain? Where do you go from there?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the band talks a lot about kind of inspirations for just their songs in general, and how, anytime they hear a song that they fall in love with, they kind of go to this mindset where they just get upset that they haven't been better at being a band and more creative. And I think that that is really interesting to think about when you listen to something like Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends. And we get into then kind of this very almost like hopeful love song. Chris Martin is very good at writing love songs. See kind of those first 3 albums they're going into this, but it is track number 5, Lovers in Japan, Reign of Love. It is a 2 for 1 apparently, because they wanted to have both of these songs on the album, but they didn't want to have 11 tracks. They wanted to have 10 tracks, so they put these 2 together, so you get 2 songs here. Lovers in Japan might be my favorite song on the album. I think that is absolutely beautiful. I think that it is it's kind of like examining just because if you're doing something, or kind of this course that you're on, doesn't mean that it's good. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just kind of means that that's what it is. But it has kind of like this ambient synth sound that kind of goes over, and it bleeds through all the way to the end. Like it starts at the beginning of the song and just runs its course straight through to when you get into the Reign of Love part of track 5, I guess. But it really has this chord progression that is really uplifting at the end. Think of watching your favorite feel good movie, or feel good soundtrack or something like that, and it just, these chords come in kind of right at the end, and it just lifts the spirits and tells you that maybe everything is going to be okay, and then it goes into Reign of Love.
Yeah, No, I have to say, we got to talk about this because this is not the first band to kind of do two songs in one where they completely change kind of tones. This song didn't completely change what it was when you go into Rain of Love, but they're
Mhm.
definitely two separate songs. And
Yes.
I also read up on this because I was like, what am I listening to? I thought that we had actually changed songs, and then I was confused when listening to this album for the first time all the way through. And why I I don't quite understand why they're not two separate songs, other than the fact that they kind of bleed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pretend to understand the meaningfulness behind that. I think it's really interesting. Because you're
It's because they didn't want
definitely,
to have 11. You want a nice even number, 10
yeah,
tracks
but they did
on
that.
your album.
They did that a second time. So they would have had 12 tracks instead of 10. And I guess like they wanted a concise 10 tracks, and that I get, but at the same time, they still put the two times in there. So now you got
They
one
do.
like 6.5 minute song or whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
true.
fine. I'm not complaining. I just don't quite understand it. And if someone, hey, listen, if someone's listening and they have an idea of why they did that we haven't come up with on Drink the Music, great. I'm all ears because I really found that profoundly interesting because they do it not only once, but they do it twice on this album. And I love this song though. I do. I'm a super romantic and I love the idea. I feel like this song was written by at the beginning. It feels like two lovers are out on a run together
Mm-hmm.
and the
Okay. Yeah.
morning is right and the light is shining and they're like, I don't know what's going to happen to us. It might be bad, it might be good. Um maybe it's going to be okay. um and then kind of at the end of the relationship, if you make it to death with one person after being with them for a long time, kind of, I love the idea, the reign of love by the church we're waiting,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reign of love by the church we're waiting. And so like at the end of your life, if you know someone is waiting there for you at the end of it all, isn't that really kind of what it's all about? And being just kind of this prisoner in this reign of love where you're not really, prisoner is an interesting word because people are like, I'm imprisoned by your love and it's so passionate, but sometimes in a relationship you're in a space where you don't necessarily want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
really an aspect of longevity and love, that people maybe don't talk about because it's not super frilly and romantic, but it's like you've made a choice and you're here and you're just gonna live through that. And that's also a testament to the love itself. It's really kind of interesting that way.
Yeah, now see, I actually interpret Reign of Love differently. When he's saying that, I'm just a prisoner in a reign of love, is almost it's almost like more of a love struckness, as opposed to an actual love, because then you get to the lines, "How I wish I'd spoken up." Away and get carried on a reign of love, because that really ties into the second half of the album where it talks a lot about telling the people that you love them, or these the interests of love, make sure you speak up. So I think that's how I interpret it. It's not so much that you're trapped in this relationship, you're trapped not being able to act on this relationship. And that's where this second half ends. I'm going to let you chew on that for a minute. Maybe we'll rediscuss when we get to side two and start talking about a little bit of those themes. But for now, if you are listening to the vinyl, this is where you stop. This is where you pick up the needle, and this is where you flip it over and take a wee bit of an album break. So, Michaela, let's talk about Coldplay's 2008 Viva La Vida, or Death and All His Friends. This Coldplay had already been nominated, what did I say, 12 Grammys. This one got nominated for 7 Grammys. This is absurd. I guess if your job is getting nominated for Grammys, then Coldplay is real good at their job. They won 3. It did not win Album of the Year. It was nominated for that, but it did win Song of the Year for Viva La Vida. It won Best Rock Album and Best Pop Performance by a duo or group. Also, this album has been certified here in the US as double platinum. So, Michaela, we mentioned Yellow in the top, and all those songs for Rush of Blood to His Head, the Scientist and Clocks and all those things. But what was your history, I guess, like with Coldplay? Was it a band that you liked, or when I suggested this, were you like, man, I don't want to listen to Coldplay? They got that bunch of weird songs now lately. I'm not into this. This isn't going to be any good. What
No.
do you think about Coldplay?
Um, So I was one of the few, probably, well, maybe one of the few who really liked the song Yellow when it first came out, and then I got real annoyed when it was on every radio station. Now, to be fair, I was in college in the year 2000, 2001 when this
Mm-hmm,
exploded onto
hmm.
the radio, and
Yes.
I was in a very small town. They only had like three radio stations, I think, and so they didn't have a lot of options. I mean, they did have a lot of options, but they wanted to play things that were like trendy and cool and that the kids would like. So um, I was so glad when there were other options to listen to that were Coldplay. And I really loved, I remember hearing Yellow for the very first time, and it was in the fall of 2000, and the seasons had just changed, and it was really beautiful because I felt like the fall and the leaves falling and the wind was going, and where I lived in Texas, the birds if you know what I'm talking about, the birds just kind of show up overnight, and there's like
Hmm.
15 million crows just sitting everywhere, and you think you're in a Hitchcock movie. But that happens, and I will never forget that feeling where with the kind of the bass or the kind of the bum 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 sounds that's the backdrop of that song, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool band. And then of course it was ruined because then I heard it 17 million times. So I have to say that when like Clocks came out, I was like, oh, this is neat. It's something different. And then when Viva La Vida came out and all the tracks were kind of pushed out through the radio in that way, I was like, this is amazing because first of all, he has a lower register. He's not as falsetto-y, which is good or bad. Some people like it, some people don't. But I thought that was a really brave choice because singing is so personal. And as you get older, you want to be able to continue to do that. And it's very hard to hit
Sure.
those high notes as you get older. So I was like, well, that's a brave choice. Um,
That's right.
but I loved watching them in concert. They did a show that was televised, and I've never seen them live, but I saw the televised live version, and I was like, this is a band that really has their stuff figured out. They knew exactly
Mm-hmm.
how to play off each other really beautifully, and also be true to the recordings that you hear, which is. I think a real challenge if you're going to do some of these really interesting sounds and layering of music, to be able to recreate that in a live setting that's not produced is really special.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned at the top, this is one of my kind of favorite albums of all time. And I wasn't super familiar with Coldplay. Kind of going into the time when I got this album, I knew the hits, right? I knew Yellow, I knew Clocks, I knew In My Place, kind of those big like mega hits. But this was the first Coldplay album that I ever really got and listened to and invested in any sort of sense of like time and stuff like that. And I remember like back in 2008, the album had just come out, and it was rated really highly, like in Rolling Stone. I was getting Rolling Stone magazine at the time, and I was traveling for work, and I kept hearing the song Viva La Vida. That you heard the song all the time. It was played probably almost as much as Yellow, maybe, but we had more music options, I guess, at that point. So maybe it didn't seem like it was played quite as much. But I'm like, man, I really like the song. I really like the way that it sounds. I really like that it's got like these violins in it. Like it is like insane sounding. Like it was just this big, huge scope of a song, and that kind of led me to swing by after work one day as I'm traveling to pick up the CD of this and listen to it, in my rental car, on my way like in and out of work every day. And I quickly fell in love with it. Myself personally, I'm not a big like singles listener. Like I don't listen to songs, kind of haphazardly. I don't make a lot of like playlists and stuff like that. It's like I will put on an album and listen to it, start to finish. And if I have time to listen to four songs, I'll start the album at the beginning and listen to the first four songs. And that's how I consume music. So listening to this and kind of this big like audible soundscape that Coldplay put together was really gorgeous and something I wasn't super familiar with at the time. Certainly there are other albums, and as we go through Drink the Music, as we go through more of my favorite albums, you'll see kind of a recurring theme is they're kind of these big, kind of sweeping compositions almost. So I really loved that about it, and yeah, I've just been a big fan ever since. I've since went back and A Rush of Blood to the Head is a phenomenal album. Like there are just 11 like masterpiece songs on that one. It's one of the highest, one of the top 500 albums there in the Rolling Stone list and stuff. And I love that one a lot, but I don't love it as much as this in terms of sitting down and listening to an album. I also have never seen Coldplay live. I did watch a live show. I think it was from like Rio or something. Right at the beginning of pandemic, bands were being pretty awesome and putting out a bunch of like their live recordings and stuff like on their YouTube channels and stuff like that. You could stream them and things like that. And Coldplay was one that my wife and I watched because I've always just been very fascinated in kind of the larger than lifeness of Coldplay, and definitely kind of a bucket list band for me. So I have to wait till they hit up the East Coast, maybe on their next time around. I'm definitely going to get out and see them for sure next time they're anywhere sort of close to this area. Maybe even not. I almost flew out west to see them this year. So that is kind of my history in terms of Coldplay and how I got into this album. So now that we've checked in 7 Grammys, that's a lot for one album.
That is
It
a
seems
lot.
like that is a lot. That is a lot. Let's get on to side number 2. So we are starting with track number 6, which is Yes. And you mentioned it kind of in that our little like recap of that. Chris Martin definitely drops his voice down in this one. He's singing in this very low register, which sounds very different, and kind of the theme of this. I'm just so tired of this loneliness. A lot of this album here for me is a lot about love loss and love not pursued, and I think that is this. It's kind of carrying off of that theme from Reign of Love, Michaela. I was just talking about it.
Yeah.
Regretful love. And Yes is countering that and responding to it almost. It's like a hypothetical argument. I think that says in this song of Yes, if I would have asked, then maybe I wouldn't be so lonely. Also, the strings in this one are really beautiful. It does kind of this downward slide. When he's saying, if I'd only, or if would you say yes, and kind of these strings slide down, and it's almost like very like sad sounding to that,
Yeah.
the way the strings are composed, and it's beautiful. This is one of my favorites from the album.
Yeah. This song was definitely super like morose. Like I felt especially at the beginning when he's talking about his back being on the ropes, and like he thought that you feel so just brought in to this space of lonely darkness, and the fact that he's singing about love it just makes it even worse. Really, because he's like, I'm trying my best, I'm really tired of being this lonely. And then it kind of makes you think about decisions that you've made in your own life. I think that's what really makes a great song, right? Is it's meaningful to whoever created it for one reason, but then your ears hear it and you interpret it and turn it into a story that touches your soul, right? And so what is it that he didn't say the right thing, or is it that he didn't ever ask, or if she, I don't know, like this idea that this bothersomeness is keeping him from being happy. And it's not even like, I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder, like, if she had said yes, would he be upset about something else now? I don't know. But
Right.
what I really loved, and it goes back to what we were talking about in the 2-for-1, because this is another kind of 2-for-1 song, right?
Mm-hmm,
Where
mm-hmm.
it becomes this kind of Chinese chant, sleep chant thing at the end. And the idea that when you're really upset or obsessed about something, if you sleep, maybe that will take the edge off somehow. That's how I interpreted it, where if it's like, man, I'm really lonely and I'm really sad, but I'm just going to try and sleep, and it says the words are sleep and you'll be satisfied. I don't know if that's really true.
Mm-hmm.
Unless when you're sleeping, you're dreaming about this person and this idea that could have all changed if you had, said what you wanted to say. And you were either, not brave enough, or you were, uh, I don't know the reasons why, but like if you just let it be done, then at least then you would know, and you could be unhappy because
Right.
she heard what she said and said no, or she said yes, and we don't know. I don't know. I just really thought that that was interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because, the lyrics there, you would have said yes. And if you would have said that, is anybody's guess. And that's what you're ultimately left awake laying awake at night thinking, right? As you don't have an answer because you never asked the question. And I think that is beautiful. It's very tragic in a sense, and that goes into track number 7, "Viva La Vida," the hit single. It was the song of the year. It's very symphonic. Obviously, everyone out there has heard of this song. It's got this timpani. It's got strings. It is very orchestral. It's a really like it's really weird to think about that this was a hit single. Like it doesn't, sound like a song that would be a hit single, just from kind of the composition of it. But it was a huge, huge song, and it is great. It retells, kind of the story of this of the French Revolution, almost, from a kind of King Louis's perspective, there of, kind of the regrets of the actions that he'd taken, and kind of this political climate of the time, in the French Revolution. And that's kind of what they Coldplay had said in 2008. It was meant to be a kind of a reflection of like the political like landscape of the time, like during kind of the war on terror and stuff. And I kind of see that, and maybe that was where they were at, like mentally. But I think kind of deeper in there, I really see Viva La Vida as kind of a self-examination of the band, because it's talking about this king who is all powerful and ruled the world. And if you think about it, in 2008, Coldplay was all powerful and ruled the world. And King Louis didn't change his ways, and the revolution happened. So really, it's kind of looking at that and saying, we got all these Grammy nominations, we've had all of these, massive hit singles, but maybe if we don't change our ways, we're no longer going to rule the world. We're going to get overthrown. And I think that this was kind of a self-examination in that sense, more so than a political statement, which is kind of the story you got back in 2008, anyways.
Sure. Yeah, I think it what's interesting to me is the idea of ruling the world, because you have these rulers of the top the top 100 and the pop charts and things like that, and someone is always number one, and then they're not. It inevitably happens, right? I mean, there are songs that have been number one for like 57 weeks in a row or some craziness, but then somebody else gets moved into their place. And so the idea of you being on top and hearing all of these amazing things and all these, so he's hearing Jerusalem bells, he's hearing Roman cavalry choirs. I always thought that was Roman Catholic cows, so that's what I
Hmm.
thought for the longest time, which is kind of funny that I was wrong. But I think that looking in the mirror, when they say, "Well, now that I'm king, what am I saying?" And some of the lyrics say, never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world. So, what did their music really mean now that they had the masses' attention? What were
Mhm.
they saying? And were they writing songs that were deeply personal? Were they writing songs that were these political kind of commentary? Were they writing songs about beliefs and all of that? I think kind of gets wrapped up into this Viva La Vida song as well. Like,
Mhm.
when we rule, what happens, and then the guilt that you might feel. There's the lyric, I know for some reason I can't explain, I know Saint Peter won't call my name. Why would they not do that? Now, it's easy to say, well, this is a parody on King Louis, but for them as a band, and for this as a songwriter, like, what did that actually mean? What regrets do you have? And if their biggest regret is that they weren't creative enough, that they weren't deep enough, this was kind of their way of being able to come to terms with that, and then
Mhm.
make it go a different way and transform.
Yeah, to transform themselves, absolutely, because everyone at least who starts a band, has these aspirations that one day they're going to hit it big, they're going to have a number one song. But at the start of that, you're doing it because you love it. You love making the music, you love writing the songs. And then at some point, potentially if you're a band as big as Coldplay, that you lose that bit of it, right? Your job now is to make yourselves and the record executives and your producer and your manager billions of dollars because you have created these giant songs. So then that's kind of the expectation going forward. So then you have to kind of take a step back, and I think that it's really kind of beautiful self-examination that I don't even know if maybe the members of the band understood that that's what was happening at the time. If you read anything kind of in their statements around there, it doesn't sound like that, or maybe they didn't want to be vulnerable enough to admit it at the time. I think maybe you get a different outlook on it now if you speak to them. So that was Viva La Vida, track 7, and it goes into track number 8, Violet Hill. So in an album that's meant to examine kind of this political spectrum and kind of their own personal spectrum, I think that this was probably the most politically charged of the time. It starts out with this piano. Chris Martin's there playing the piano, and it goes into this kind of like fuzzed out guitar riff. And it goes on to say very pointedly, it was a long and dark December when the banks became cathedrals and a fox became a god. That fox is the one on television. Priests clutched onto Bibles, hollowed out to fit their rifles, and a cross was held aloft. So I think this is the most kind of politically charged song of this. It was meant to be kind of this political anthem, but even this song, the band couldn't get away from bringing it into this really kind of personal, emotional, almost like love sickness bit as it ends, and it says, "I took my love down to Violet Hill. There we sat in the snow all the time. She was silent still. So if you love me, won't you let me know?" Like it's deeply personal, and I love that line. It's my favorite line from the whole album. But it's almost like we attempted to write this politically charged song, which they do, but it's so beautiful in the composition and how ultimately it just kind of ties back in to this longing for love and something more.
Yeah. I don't know. This song it really struck me because, not wanting to be a soldier, right? He goes on to say, "I don't want to be a soldier who the captain of some sinking ship would stow far below." And when if we're going to talk politicalness, I mean, a lot is different from now than it was in 2008. But if you love someone, would you tell them? Would you show them? And how would you show them? Would you show them by being silent? Right. And there's a lot of things to be said for being like, well, I love you, but I'm not going to stand up for you. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be said in that sense, right? Where, when you're thinking of, I took my love down to Violet Hill and she was silent. Like, was she silent because she wasn't shocked? Was she silent because she wouldn't stand up for you? And now you're going to be a stowaway on some sinking ship? Like, I don't know. I thought that it could have gone that route. It didn't feel like it. When you look at the lyrics, it's very different than how it feels when you hear it. But just looking down, I kind of, in my head, I pictured this really awful, like, war scene that these two people are looking at, and they don't know how they're going to make it through this mess, and how they're seeing this horrible scene lay down before them, and what's kind of led to that, and being him thinking he's going to be a soldier and she's going to be here alone, and how they're overcome with emotion around that is really hard. It's one of my favorite songs of the album because I didn't expect it to be when it first started. And I heard the song for the first time, but really deep. I mean, this is probably the song that I could listen to over and over again and get something else out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So that is track number 8. And then we go into track number 9, Strawberry Swing. The skies could be blue, but without you, it's a waste of time. I think the song is lovely. I really like the messaging of it, right? The whole world could be happy, but if you're not with the person that you want to be with, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how happy it is. That is all just a waste of time. I love how kind of idyllic it is. I really love kind of the composition of the song, and I think that it's a nice little bit of almost like a brighter look at love, because this album is pretty dark throughout, and kind of its tones and tales of love, and obviously kind of the political messaging through it. But this one is a little bit more hopefully. It says, I wouldn't want to change a thing.
I love this song because of the lyrics, and the idea that he doesn't care about anything if he's alone or without his person. You said it best. I don't think I'm going to be able to top anything that you're saying about this one. I liked it. It was very sweet. And it's got a really good cocktail. I think we made a really good cocktail that pairs with it. So
yeah, absolutely. So track 9, Strawberry Swing, and we get to the final track of the album, which has a little bit of a bonus track. There's like 12 and a half tracks on this 10 track album here, but number 10, Death and All His Friends. It's, I guess, the second title track, and basically Death and All His Friends to me is basically the purpose of this entire album. It's looking at life, it's looking at death, it's looking at legacy, and missed loves, or missed miss love and miss connection with people. And the song kind of reminds me of that line from that George R. Martin work, Game of Thrones. We look at death and say not today. That's kind of the theming that I get from this. And then Death and All of His Friends, it bleeds into kind of this outro kind of thing. It's called The Escapist, which is just the life and Technicolor theme that we got at the beginning of the album. So it's very much kind of this bookend. And here, kind of in this escapist bit, it almost to me feels like basically you've listened to this album, you have lived this life, and now the escapist is you basically laying on your deathbed, as listeners laying on your deathbed, or as the band here, Coldplay, is laying on their deathbed, and it says, in the end we lie awake and we dream of making our escape. And I think that it's beautiful, and it's very pointed. It's almost tragic, but it's almost, because of the way that life in Technicolor was composed, it almost feels a little bit hopeful at the same time.
yeah.
And it's gorgeous. I love the way that it ends.
Yeah, this is definitely like a culmination song of a journey that I feel that Coldplay took us on, and all the varied emotions around regret and love and fear and war, and again, just I think about it. If you were to think of the life of an album, and we're at the end of the album, we're at the end of listening to the album as ourselves. The bittersweetness of this song that kind of comes in, because it does have this like very open feeling of hope and letting go, which is kind of like at the end, it's like the death of the album, because this is the last track, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it was birthed, it was like this opening, like big. Like you said, we're sitting in a theater and the curtains open, and the beginning of the show, right? The beginning of it. And this is the end of it. And it's still as epic and resounding and big, but in a different tone, because this is your last kind of breath. And
Mm-hmm.
the breadth with which of the emotions that you felt this whole album just culminates really beautifully. I was so glad that they made the decision to put the songs in the orders that they did, with this being kind of the cap at the end, because it suits so well as a really beautiful bookend
Mm-hmm.
from the first song, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of keep waiting there through this escapist section for it to kind of explode into that exuberance that the first one does. And credit to the sound engineers here on this album, because if you're listening to this, say, on your phone, or on iTunes or whatever like that, if you have it on to repeat, like, you get through this and it just immediately starts back into the first song, like it's almost never ending. If you wouldn't know that it ended and started back up into the first track again. And I think that stuff like that is really neat in terms of a musical design kind of thing and composition. So that is Viva La Vida and Death and All His Friends from 2008 by Coldplay. It is like I said, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I listened to it a ton, and just really kind of leaned into. It's not so much of like a story, telling mechanism. Like it's not telling a cohesive story like some albums are that are more of this kind of orchestral and composition. It's really kind of a look like internally, I think, of what it means to, change course in your own life, and change course, when you've kind of quote unquote like made it big, or things like that. And I think that it's really interesting, and it's a really kind of beautiful pivot. As much as we love the Coldplay, singles from those first couple of albums, something like this is almost transformative. Now, going from here for Coldplay, that's a different story for another day. I don't want to get into how I feel about that stuff. Well, the most recent one I like quite a bit, but yeah, this was it. This was a pinnacle for me, and it's a band that I like a lot and have a deep interest in, and seeing what that feels like, seeing them live and perform these songs, big and opulently. But yeah, this one's really good. So, Michaela, I'm gonna throw it back to you. You'd obviously you'd heard Viva La Vida. You'd probably heard, a couple of these other tracks, along the way. There were a bunch of singles off of this album that hit the radio waves, but you'd never listened like to this as an album in album form. Like sat down and listened to tracks, 1 through 10 or 12 and a half, or whatever the case is
Right.
here. Did you have any different takeaways, or did you mostly just be like, oh yeah, there's that Viva La Vida song? I remembered, or I don't know what Brian's talking about, or
No, no.
what were your kind of thoughts on your first listening?
Um, I definitely have a newfound, well, maybe not newfound, a solidified appreciation for Coldplay as a band. And again, the sound engineering, I thought of it in a very different way because of kind of the layers of some of the sound work that had to be done. Was pretty magnificent. I really liked the chance that they took, because at the end of the day, right, they knew what was doing well for them. They knew what was getting a lot of airplay for sure, and so and the span in which they took to create this, they did this in a few months time, and then they had to take a break when they were making this album to go out and tour for in Latin America. And so
Mhm.
there's some like cool Latin America influences for some of the songs, but the way in which the album was built, I thought was really lovely. It definitely made me think of them differently than before. And I think that that's really important. If you're going to be someone who likes to say that you love music, being able to put yourself in a situation and really have a listen to an entire album rather than some of the hot licks that the radio kind of pushes out, that's where you're going to get a lot of the seeds of goodness, I think, that are lost on a lot of other people. It's kind of, one of the reasons why we like other art forms that we've been talking about on this show, right?
Mhm.
Is really having something and being brave enough to have your paradigm shifted. And so I think that was something that was really good for me. And I love having all my thoughts and beliefs that I hold dear really challenged in a different way. And that's what this really did for me. And as a romantic, I thought some of these songs were just really beautifully sad, in
Mhm.
the kind of sitting in this area of regret, which juxtaposes the sound that's coming out of the songs, because the sounds can actually be quite hopeful, but the lyrics indicate that you're actually really not. And having that whole new take on what it means to be quote unquote casually sensitive was really cool. I regret that I hadn't listened to the whole album earlier in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that I finally got you roped into sitting down and
Yeah.
listening through this one for sure. And I think that it's great. So let us out there know what you think about Coldplay's 2008 album Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends. You can do that. Make sure you take pictures of your Strawberry Smash cocktail. Send those in. Let us know what your favorite Coldplay song is. Let us know if you've ever seen Coldplay in concert. I want to see pictures of that, because that's probably a wild time. Do that. Do it on our social medias. It is at Drink the Movies on Instagram and Threads is facebook.com/drink the movies. You can go to our website, www.drinkthemovies.com, where there's going to be a sweet picture of our cocktail, episode recaps for all of our other episodes, stuff like that. Make sure you go there and check that out, drinkthemovies.com. You want to make sure that you're going over to our Patreon if you want to know what album is coming next. We're going to have that poll is going to be up, and voting is going to be ongoing by the time you're hearing this. That is patreon.com/drinkthemovies. We got bonus content in there, cocktail chats, hangouts, all sorts of stuff. So make sure you go and check that out, and to make sure that you're getting the best of this music entertainment that we're bringing you on our 2 drops a week. Michaela, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Good Pods, anywhere where Spotify podcasts are distributed. We are different, but we've not left. We're still in the building. So if you're hearing us now, there's a subscribe button somewhere on your phone, on your little rectangle, press it. We do 2 drops a week. We still do 2 drops a week. We still have a Patreon site. And we can't do this without you all to listen to us. So if you're liking what you're hearing, let us know. If you're not, that's okay too. Let us know what you want to hear instead. If there's other music out there, if there's a cocktail that you love that we still haven't covered in the over 3 years that we've been doing this, I'd love to know all about it. And you can find us and leave us reviews in that way. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is volume 2 in the books, Michaela. We have 2 albums up, 2 albums down. I'm very proud of us. I think that, kind of like Coldplay, we took the, what we've been doing, drink the movies, and we said, it's time to see what else, so to push ourselves, to challenge ourselves. And to think about our own lives and legacy, I guess. Maybe not quite as deep as Coldplay there on that one, but we've definitely changed angles here for the time being, and having a great time doing it. So thank you everyone for listening along. Let us know all those things, do all those things we just asked you to do, and we'll talk to you next time on
Drink
the
music.